Thanks, Eric. Thanks so much. So Simon meets with leaders, governments, and organizations all over the world because they value his unconventional views on business, leadership, and performance. His latest book is called The Infinite Game, and we are thrilled he's with us here today. So thanks so much for being with us here, Simon. Great to see you.
Nice to see you too. Good to see you.
Very excited you're here. So we are living in incredibly challenging times, of course, as we all know. COVID-19 has exacerbated and brought to the forefront challenges that have long existed, but it's put them under a microscope, brought them into specific relief, right? I'm talking about issues like mental health and health equity and the need for a more connected system. And everyone watching today is leading through all of it, and you bring a fresh perspective that we can all benefit from. So again, great to have you here. Looking forward to hearing your points of view.
Thank you.
Now, I have to start with this. You describe yourself as an unshakable optimist, and dying to have you chat about what does that mean? How did you land on that?
Well, it's who I am and it's how I approach the world. I think there's a big difference between being positive and being an optimist. A lot of people accuse me of being naive because I say I'm an optimist, as if I deny the reality of the world. Being positive is sort of this blindness, I think. It's like everything's fine, everything's good, everything's fine here. Optimism is not a denial of the current state. It's a belief that the future is bright. I know that we're standing in a dark tunnel, but the difference is I'm not focused on the darkness. I'm focused on the light at the end of the tunnel. I don't know how far away that light is, and I don't know how long it's going to take us to get there. But I know that if we work together and we stay focused and head in that one direction, we will eventually reach the light. That, to me, is what optimism is all about. It's about hope.
Love it, about hope. So in reading about you, you lived on 4 continents by the time you were 10 years old. And obviously you traveled the world. And so I'm curious to get your take on your perspective on the healthcare system in the US. How does it strike you? What's working, what's not? Just give me your take on the healthcare system.
I mean, one of the things that always shocked me with the healthcare system here is that if you can't afford some surgery, there's a high possibility you're going to die. I remember, as a kid watching the news, and they would have these, feel-good stories at the end, trying to raise money for someone in need to get a surgery. That blows my mind. Yes, I understand that healthcare is expensive, but it blows my mind that if you can't afford it, you could actually die.
So we have a virtual room today of healthcare leaders from all over the system. Leaders and professionals and stakeholders. And sometimes it can be hard to be an optimist, right, as you described as you opened. So my question is, as we come in every day, we start our days, what should we be thinking about? How do you keep that optimism going in the face of so many challenges, both in the system and then all around us?
It's about service. It's about thinking about people. Whenever I give a talk or do something like this, I literally will say out loud to myself before I start, I'm here to give. I'm not here to sell books. I'm not here to get followers. I'm not here for applause. I'm here to share what I know and hopefully inspire someone to affect some change. And quite frankly, the best organizations and the best leaders have the same perspective. I mean, a lot of people, especially in healthcare, talk a big game. They talk about the desire to help people be healthy. But if you look at the way they make decisions, it looks mighty selfish. It looks more like, driving a price of an equity or working to achieve some personal bonus. And the reality is we have an amazing opportunity to build cultures that are genuinely in service to others. And if we are able to do that, the kind of innovation and the kind of joy that we get from our work skyrocket. I mean, at the end of the day, being in service to human beings, to other people, to get to meet people who are the direct beneficiaries of our work, that's what work should be about.
All right, so let's stay with that theme because you sort of took me to the place I wanted to go to next. So when we talk about healthcare and the healthcare system, we often talk about what we call the triple aim, right? Delivering positive experiences, better outcomes, and then ultimately lowering costs. So you started to go there around what it really should be all about. So that's been the focus of the system. When you think about that, I want you to go another click down. Are we getting it right?
I think that there are some examples of getting it right.
Okay.
But as a system, I think we can do a lot better. I think we can do a lot better. When I listen to some healthcare executives, they talk about being shackled by legislation and things like that. And though those things are true, this is the opportunity for innovation. You don't get innovation when all the conditions are right. Then there's nothing to innovate. You get innovation when you face obstacles because you have to outthink a problem. And like I said, if we're obsessed with service, it's amazing what happens. Take just what happened in COVID, for example. Just take a simple little thing like how to treat our people. Good leadership. As soon as COVID happened, whether someone was an effective or ineffective leader prior to COVID, they leaned on their instincts as human beings. And what they did is they picked up the phones and they called their people. They said, "Are you okay? I'm worried about you. Just checking in on you to make sure you're okay." Well, that's called good leadership. We shouldn't have to wait for a crisis for that human instinct to kick in. That's what we should have been doing prior to COVID, and I hope those habits remain after COVID. The point is we kind of know what to do when we lean on those human instincts and think about people and tap that empathy muscle.
Got it. Yeah, I love that. So let's stay with that theme of sort of intrinsic, value and what drives you, right? So you talk about starting with why. Starting with a why mindset. So Triple Aim talks about the outcome ultimately. So I'd love to hear you talk about why we all should be thinking about starting with our why.
Well, when we know why we do what we do, it gives us a foundation. It's a sense of purpose, a reason to get out of bed in the morning. Nobody's really motivated, weirdly enough, nobody's really motivated by profit. We like it, but that's always a result. It's not a reason to get out of bed in the morning. And I actually see this happen more in senior executives than junior people, which is once they get good at their jobs and they're used to like landing the business and, hitting the numbers and they get their bonuses and it's exciting for a short period of time, but they start asking themselves, what's this all for? What is the purpose of all this? And nobody wants to, have on their tombstone the last balance in their bank account. We want to have on our tombstones the kind of people we were to others, beloved mother, devoted father. It's literally how we show up in the lives of others, which is how we want to be remembered. And so to think about our purpose when we're younger in our career, we won't have a crisis when we're older. But all people and all organizations should have a sense of purpose, cause, or belief. They should have a sense of why. There should be a foundation upon which to build the organization.
Got it. Makes sense. Makes a ton of sense. So you talk about trust, flexibility, and courage. So let's focus on courage for a minute. That's super important in what we do every day as a healthcare system and healthcare professionals. How do you define courage in general for a business like this? How would you talk to us about courage?
I think courage is the choice to do the right thing, not necessarily the expedient thing. And I am the first to admit that I understand that there are massive pressures on organizations and the individuals who work in those organizations, massive pressures that sometimes force us to do the wrong thing. And we've seen it in extreme examples. For example, you look at Wells Fargo Bank, where thousands of employees opened millions of fake bank accounts because of the extreme pressure they faced to make certain numbers, that they actually did highly unethical things, sometimes illegal things, to make those numbers. I understand there's huge pressure, and that's where courage comes in. Especially at the senior levels. I understand the pressures. If you work for a public company, the pressures from Wall Street to hit certain short-term targets. Even though everybody, every C-level executive who works for a public company, it's a big open secret, we all know that Wall Street forces executives to make decisions that they know are bad for their company and forces them to avoid making decisions that they know are good for their company. So courage is the choice to do the right thing. The choice to do the ethical thing, the moral thing, the right thing for the organization, for the employees and for the patients and the customers, not just for some external constituency. And the interesting thing about courage is I believe that we get courage from the people around us. It's not just about digging down deep and finding the courage. We have courage when somebody says to us, I believe in you. I got you. I will go through this with you. And if everything goes south, don't worry, we're in this together. That's what gives us the courage.
So in this audience, we have providers, we have, again, stakeholders from administrative side, running big systems, et cetera. Just one more piece on courage. If you're a clinician, you're a nurse practitioner, you're out there delivering care, how does courage show up in some of those critical key moments of truth?
Again, it's about taking care of each other. It's about doing the right thing, but ensuring that the people to the left and the people to the right feel like someone has their back. Because if we all feel like we're working independently, it's very hard to find the courage because fear sets in. Fear of getting in trouble, fear of being humiliated, fear of losing our jobs. All of these things can happen. Fear of doing the wrong thing even. And so we do the careful thing. Sometimes we need to take risks. And so the really courage is born out of good leadership. And remember, leadership doesn't have to come from the top. I know many people at the highest levels of organizations who are not leaders. We do as they tell us because they have authority over us, but we would never follow them. And yet I know many people at low levels of organizations that have no formal authority, and yet they've made the choice to look after the person to the left of them and to look after the person to the right of them, and we would follow them anywhere. So where we get courage is when there's good leadership, and leadership can happen at any level. The choice is to be the leader you wish you had.
So Simon, I want to hear you chat a little bit about what it's going to take as an industry for us to recognize that we're likely playing in an infinite game with a finite mindset. So what's it going to take to break out of that?
So first, we should probably define what an infinite game is. A philosopher and theologian named James Carse in the mid-1980s defined these two types of games, finite games and infinite games. A finite game is defined as known players, fixed rules, and an agreed upon objective. Football, baseball. There's always a beginning, middle, and an end. And if there's a winner, there has to be a loser. Then you have infinite games. Infinite games are defined as known and unknown players, which means new players can join at any time. The rules are changeable, which means anyone can play however they want. And the objective is to perpetuate the game, to stay in the game as long as possible. The reality is we are players in infinite games every day of our lives. There's no such thing as winning global politics. There's no such thing as winning career. No one's declared the winner of careers. There's no winning healthcare, and there's definitely no such thing as winning business. No one's declared the winner of business. But when we listen to the language of so many leaders, it becomes clear that they don't necessarily know the game they're playing in. They talk about being number one, being the best, or beating their competition. Based on what? Based upon what agreed upon objectives, what agreed upon metrics, what agreed upon timeframes. The reality is, so many people are playing with a finite mindset in an infinite game, which is actually a bit of a problem. Because when we do that, there's a few very consistent and predictable outcomes, amongst which include the decline of trust, the decline of cooperation, and the decline of innovation. And so it's really we have to completely change our mindset to play for the game we're in. And the only true competitor in the infinite game is actually ourselves. It's actually a game of constant improvement. To play in the infinite game is actually about asking ourselves, how can we make our leaders better this year than they were last year? How do we make our culture better this year than it was last year? How do we make our product, our customer service, our delivery better this year than it was last year? And though it's important to know who the other players in the game are, it's a complete fool's errand to set out to beat them. As it turns out, multiple companies can all be successful in the same game selling similar or the same products. So we have to learn to adjust our mindset for the game we're actually in. And the healthiest companies with the best leadership, the best cultures, and more innovation are playing with an infinite mindset because that's the game they're in.
So innovation, exactly where I wanted to go next. So you you went there perfectly. So it certainly requires a new way of thinking, a new way of doing things. And as you described, it requires optimism to make things better. So how can this large audience influence both the people on their teams as well as folks around them in their organizations, in their hierarchies to become the unshakable optimists that you are?
Well, I wish we could. We can't actually change somebody else. And I hear this all the time. It's the most common question I get. I totally believe in what you're saying, but senior management has a finite mindset. They're short-term driven. What can I do to change their minds? And the answer is nothing. No number of anonymously sent books will ever change how they see the world and how they lead. The only thing we can do is take responsibility for ourselves and take responsibility for the people who we can affect, those around us. And the only way we affect them is how they feel when they come to work. And what you start to see when we elect to be the leaders we wish we had, when we choose to adopt those infinite mindsets, what you start to see is these pockets of high performance and high morale and more innovation. And in good organizations, leadership will look down and see these high-performing teams and saying, what are you doing? We want to learn from you. But even in bad organizations, in poorly led organizations, these teams outperform. So leadership usually just leaves them alone because they're doing fine. And the whole point of the infinite mindset is that one of these people, two of these people will eventually move out of this group, get promoted out, move to another group, and they'll take everything they've learned from this group and bring it to the new group. And then you have another high performing team over here, and eventually the tail wags the dog. We've all had this situation. We've all worked for great leaders, and we've tried to emulate what they've done in our careers. We carry it forwards. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Unfortunately, we don't have control of the time frames. We don't know how long these things take. They could go very quickly. They could be go more slowly. But the point is, if we commit to the path, kind of like exercise, if you commit to the regime, 100%, you will get in shape if you work out 20 minutes every day. 100%. How long does it take? I have no clue. Nobody knows. But you just commit to the regime. It's the exact same thing. Leadership is a process. It's a lifestyle.
Okay, so 2 quick things I want you to touch on because I'm so compelling and connected to the themes you just put out there. And I want to give you one of your quotes, okay? Because I was very compelled by this. So, I'd rather be certain of the destination and agnostic as to the path.
True.
Talk about that.
So, if you think about, here's the metaphor. You wake up in the morning and you walk outside and you see your neighbor packing up their car. And you say, hey, where are you going? And they look at you and they say, vacation. And you go, great, where are you going? They say, vacation. And you're like, no, I heard you, but where are you going? And they look at you like you're crazy and they go, vacation, right? And you're like, well, how are you going to get there? And then they tell you the route. They go, well, I'm taking I-95 and my goal is to drive 300 miles a day. Well, that's kind of how a lot of businesses run, which is they can't tell you where they're going, but they can tell you what their goals are and they can tell you what route they're taking. They can tell you their strategy and they can say how much money they want to make every year, but to what end? Where are you going? And you hear stuff to be the best, to be the primary, the best value, blah, 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 to drive the profits. None of these are destinations. Rather, to wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to California. And when you know the destination, when you have a sense of cause or vision, an idealism of why you wake up in the morning, then what ends up happening is, yes, you can still have goals. You can still be keen to drive 300 miles a day. But if there's a roadblock, you can take a path sideways. And everybody looks at you and goes, what are you doing? You're going sideways. But no path is ever straight, but you know that you're going in the right direction. And I think that's kind of what's happening in COVID. We talk about the dark times in COVID, that a lot of organizations don't know what they're doing. And what I've heard some say is it's like we're feeling in the dark. Well, if you're just feeling in the dark and if you see something that might work and you do that, eventually if we turn on the lights, it's going to look like you're taking this route. Whereas if you have at least a sense of vision, a fixated point, that dot of light, you're still in the dark and you're still feeling. The difference is you're going in a bumpy direction, at least to one place. And that's how I've lived my whole career. I know where I want to get to. I want to create a world in which the vast majority of people wake up every single morning inspired, feel safe wherever they are, and end the day fulfilled by the work that they do. I have no idea how I'm going to get there. I never imagined I'd be an author. I never imagined I'd be a speaker. I never imagined any of these things. I was open to whatever route I needed to take to move towards that direction, that ideal state of the world.
I think we all can learn from that, exactly. And it's going to take that kind of long-term pursued sense of purpose and why to get there, given the complexity of what we're dealing with, right? And humankind goes on and on and on, so it's going to take that.
Yeah,
all right.
An elephant one apple at a time.
Yes, that's right. One at a time. One at a time. All right, so hey, we hear you have a passion for a group in London called Rambert Dance. So
I do.
Tell our audience a little bit about them and what they do and what they're all about.
They are the oldest ballet company in the United Kingdom. And you'd think old ballet companies do old things, but they don't. They push boundaries. They push their dancers. They push the people who work there. They push their audiences to reimagine and reinvent. And when I first met them a few years ago, I was just astonished at how they come together as innovators. I was so inspired by them. And there's so much we could learn from them about how to approach problems. They're an amazingly supportive group of each other and take care of each other, and the results are astonishing. And so I've tried to support them whenever and wherever I can as they continue to push themselves and push us.
Well, given your passion for them and what you've described to us, we here at Optum have donated $10,000 to Rambert Dance. So
that means everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you for telling us about them and supporting them. So before we get to final thoughts, one more theme for you really quickly, and then I'll let you close this out here. Very compelled about your concept of creating momentum and what that means for you. And again, in terms of long-term vision, purpose, maybe even leaving something behind. So talk to us a little bit about that, Simon.
So when I learned about this concept of the infinite game, and I've been practicing an infinite mindset, it raises the interesting question, well, if I'm never going to get to the destination, if the destination is an ideal, then how do I measure it? Well, metrics are still extremely important, and the infinite game is not the absence of finite games. You can still have finite games within the infinite game, but those finite games have to lead towards something. It's like you can't run in a marathon without mile markers. It's actually unnerving. We need metrics. We need milestones. But the whole point of vision and just cause is to know that these milestones are going in some sort of direction, that we can feel like we're making progress. And I think we use the wrong analogies when we think about business. We use sports analogies and war analogies. You know, it's bottom of the ninth. You know, it's like we're trying to create these. But the problem is the game doesn't end. We have to start thinking of business like a lifestyle. It's like health. You know, I want to live a healthy life. What do I have to do that? Well, I've got to exercise. I've got to eat well. I've got to get sleep. I've got to maintain my personal relationships. There's probably a list of 30 other things. I can't do all of these things perfectly all the time. It's a journey. And it's totally fine to have finite goals within that. I want to lose X amount of weight by X date. Fantastic. Set yourself on that regime, and every single day you stand on the scale. We do the exact same thing in business. We pick arbitrary numbers on arbitrary dates, and we count usually the money to see if we're making progress towards that goal. And if you hit your goal, you're ecstatic, you're over the moon. But the problem is you have to keep exercising for the rest of your life. The game is not over. And if you miss your goal, do you know what happens?
What?
Nothing. Nothing happens. In fact, because you picked arbitrary numbers to hit on arbitrary dates. Right. And what's more important to me is the momentum. If I look back at the momentum that you've built, is it like this? Is it some crazy scale where, you know, there's some push right at the end and you might hit the numbers? You know, you just like stop eating and stop drinking right before you weigh yourself on the last day. That's not healthy. I want to see that there's a steady progress, and I can easily see that I will hit my goal in 1 month from now. I just happen to pick the wrong date. And to me, to understand momentum is sometimes more important. And unfortunately in business, we only reward people who hit the right number on the right date, and we forget to look at how they got there. And very often we have amazing teams in our company that are making incredible headway, and morale is high, and progress is steady, but they just missed the date. And we don't reward them, which means that we're not encouraging that behavior. So I'm a great believer that we have to count momentum, and it helps us feel like we're making progress towards this larger goal. This is what idealism is, that every milestone we pass, every bite of the elephant we take makes us feel like we're getting a little closer to that ideal state, and that is nothing short of inspiring.
I love it. I feel your passion. Feel it raising up. Yeah. So incredibly great thoughts, incredibly relevant, really important for us as a healthcare system and as an industry, and really appreciate the time together today. I can do this all day. I wish we had more time, but did we leave anything out, Simon? Any other closing thoughts before we say so long for now?
I think we've touched upon a lot of it, and I think the thing we have to remember is that every one of us has the ability to be a leader, and leadership is a human enterprise. It has nothing to do with rank. It is the awesome responsibility to see those around us rise. And when we are given a leadership position, when we're offered rank, then we get to affect that responsibility at scale. And, you know, we train people when they're junior. When someone's young in their job, we give them tons of training. If you're a nurse or a doctor, you actually have to go to school. You have to get licensed. Why do we want you to study so much? So you'll know what you're doing and you'll be good at what you do. And if you're really good at what you do, we promote you. And eventually, you get promoted to a position where you're now responsible for the people who do the job you used to do. But so rarely do we train people and teach them how to lead. And this is why we get managers and not leaders. Because I do know how to do your job better than you. That's what got me promoted. The problem is that's not your job anymore. And so I think there's an amazing opportunity to teach leaders how to lead. You know, we will get leaders if we teach people how to do the job we want them to do. Just like we train them when they're junior, we need to train them when they're senior, because leadership, again, is that awesome responsibility to take care of people. It's human skills, listening. It's about effective confrontation. It's about how to have difficult conversations. This is what leadership is. It's the most human thing there is. And so I think we can all take it upon ourselves to just study and be the leaders we wish we had.
Thanks, Simon. That's a perfect way to wrap us up, man. So really appreciate you for taking the time. Great insights. Wish you well in your continued travels and your journey. And keep that inspiration coming, man. We all appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other.
Will do. Will do. Let's go back to you, Eric. Thank you.
Thank you, Norman and Simon. Well, that concludes Optum Forum for 2020. We hope you enjoyed it. You learned a lot and made some connections along the way. Before we go, I'd like to thank all the Optum staff and our Media Loft partners for making this virtual conference possible. Great job, team. Thank you so much. I also want to thank everyone for attending. All of us at Optum feel privileged to be your partner. When you receive our email asking for your feedback on this event, please take the time to complete the survey. We listen to you because we know it makes us better. And I've got some great news. We're excited to announce that Optum Forum will take place in Boston, Massachusetts in 2021. We plan to open registration after the new year and hope all of you will be able to join us. In the meantime, sign up for updates at optumforum.com. Thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you next year. Take care, everyone.